morning, everyone. Welcome to another CTS webinar. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the dark web. What does this mean? I guess you'll have to find out. We have a very special guest with us. This is Katie Wallace. Katie Wallace, she's a subject matter expert on cybersecurity. Katie thrives on helping partners think outside of the box when it comes to security and compliance. That's why we have her with us today. With the passion of helping people, her goal is to align her partner's vision with the software's functionality and service capabilities. She has successfully served a range of organizations, including solo entrepreneurs, small businesses, and large organizations. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie.
Absolutely, Sherry. Thank you so much for bringing me into today's session. I'm excited to cover with you folks how compromised credentials can lead to a data breach, what cyber criminals do with our credentials once they've been obtained. We're going to go through some screenshots of the dark web and real examples of phishing attacks. And really, we're going to be focused on the current landscape of threats that a lot of SMBs are facing, and how they've evolved really with the increased remote workforce. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to be talking about, just actions and steps that you can take to educate your employees and create a better culture overall of cybersecurity for your organization. So jumping into things, again, today we are going to focus on some of the changes of the security landscape before we get into those fun screenshots of the dark web. And with changes to our work environment, we've really seen an increase in cyber criminals trying to profit from our information. And when we think of cybercrime, I think we need to shift our mindsets. In the past, we've thought about cyber criminals, sitting in a dark basement, wearing a hoodie, and barely coming up for air. Today, cybercrime is really run like a business where they're making money off of our data. Modern cyber attacks, such as sophisticated phishing attacks, can be really profitable with seemingly low success rates for these cyber criminals. The cost of launching a phishing attack for them is low, and a single successful phishing attack can yield thousands or even millions of dollars in revenue for the cyber criminal. The dark web, unfortunately, is a huge marketplace for stolen data and business information. After a data breach or a hacking incident, business information is often bought and sold on the dark web by these cyber criminals looking to make money off of our good name, our data, numbers, or any other information that's associated with our business that they were able to get their hands on. You may ask, why not just shut down the dark web if it's only used for cybercrime? Well, the dark web itself was actually created by the U.S. Department of Defense for whistleblower situations, allowing sources to remain anonymous, and is used by a lot of folks in repressed countries to help them with their speech. They need to become aware of just information that they're not able to get their hands on. And realistically, whether you watch your local or your national news, you've likely heard news stories that have mentioned phishing attacks, ransomware, and data breaches. Even these opportunist crooks are exploiting the coronavirus as part of their attempts to gain access to our information. Outside of COVID-19 related attacks, we've all heard stories about Capital One, Equifax, and Facebook. These are all examples of companies who have been in the news for going through security incidences and data breaches. Remember hearing about that WannaCry virus going around a few years ago, targeting computers running on the Microsoft operating systems? With the WannaCry virus, that was really the first instance that we saw of cyber criminals encrypting data and demanding payments in the form of Bitcoin currency to get the data back. But unfortunately, many cyber attacks, they don't have to be as notorious as the WannaCry virus to take an entire organization down. And there is something that all of these data breaches have in common, and unfortunately, it's the human element. You can have the best firewall in place, but all it takes for your company to fall victim to a ransomware attack is your employees sharing credentials in a phishing email. Or maybe your employees click on a bad link on the internet. And unfortunately, with just one click, your entire network or PCs can be affected with that virus. To really paint this picture for you, we are sharing a couple examples of third-party applications that we all use in our everyday job functions. Given how many platforms a businesses use on an everyday basis, you don't have to connect too many dots to realize that you've got information that cybercriminals want and can sell on the dark web. Think about all the data that lives within sites like these. You have your customer records that potentially live in a CRM. You have your financial sites that house payroll data and financial information. You also have your email platforms like Office 365 and Gmail that connect you to a lot of different services and allow that communication within your business to keep up with things. Something that we need to keep in mind, though, is what connects us to all of these websites. And that's our email addresses and passwords. And these are websites that go out of our own network. So these are websites that we trust to house our information. When cybercriminals access your email and passwords, they don't just steal this information and sell it on the dark web. They can also use your email account to distribute malware or launch phishing attacks against your own contacts. And unfortunately, when these fraudsters get a hold of email addresses and passwords, they use an automated process. And what I mean by this is a lot of folks are guilty of reusing passwords or similar passwords across logins. So if you're one of those folks that use the same password across your logins to make it easier on yourself at the end of the day, something to keep in mind is what happens if a cyber criminal is able to get their hands on it. When they go through this automated process, they start firing endless variations and combinations on other websites. I'm talking hundreds of websites at a time they can do this on. And because so many people use the same password or similar passwords across multiple accounts, it becomes highly possible that a cyber criminal is able to get into multiple of your logins and the data that lives behind these websites. Again, that financial information that could be within these accounts, your customer information, and once they're able to get into your Office 365 account, again, they're able to start reaching out to your contacts, potentially try to see, what further data that they can get from them. So it's important to kind of look at what we use to log into these websites and how the cyber criminals can get their hands on this data. Now, because so many folks are reusing passwords, we're connecting to more and more websites at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of companies move to operate under the zero trust model. Traditionally, I think businesses think of their data security kind of like a castle and moat concept. In castle and moat security, we trust everybody that works at our company to have access to most or a lot of our data. In this scenario, everybody has the keys to our castle. We place a moat or a firewall around our castle or security, and we think we're good. The problem with this approach is once an attacker gains access to our castle or network, the attacker now has free reign all over your company's most sensitive data. For this reason, the castle and moat concept fails when it comes to data security. Also, companies no longer have their data in just one place. Today, information is often spread across multiple vendors, applications, and websites, which makes it more difficult to have that single layer of security and control for an entire network. The concept of zero trust means that nobody is trusted by default from inside or outside the network or moat, and verification is required from everybody trying to gain access to the resources or the network itself. And the reason we see, a lot of folks moving to that zero trust model, just even outside of exposed credentials that could lead to data breaches, is because compliance laws are becoming stricter. No matter the industry or company size, all businesses need to adhere to certain laws and regulations as part of your operations. We should really be no stranger to data privacy laws. Since 1996, doctors' offices have needed to be compliant with our health records by abiding by the HIPAA regulation. And just like medical offices, businesses need to be aware of any compliance laws they face. The state of New York actually just rolled out the New York Shield Act, and New York now joins other states like California, Massachusetts, and having government mandated regulations surrounding how its residents' data is handled. Being negligent to these regulations can impose even larger fines in the scenario that your company does fall victim to a ransomware attack, data breach, or a security incident. It is also rumored that the United States is going to be looking at a data privacy law that encapsulates all the 50 states. Again, just because we have so many accounts that house sensitive information, not just from a business perspective, but from a consumer perspective as well. And it's important that we look at those laws and how our business data should be handled. Now, this is where we get into the fun part of the presentation, and I'm going to be sharing several screenshots from the dark web itself. Going back to the concept of the dark web, it is truly shrouded in mystery for a lot of folks, and quite rightfully so. Again, it was created by the US Department of Defense to offer more anonymity to its users than the surface web. The dark web has become synonymous with digital crime, where anything is sold from, data down to weapons, drugs, and even stolen credit card information. The dark web is actually a portion of the deep web, and it's intentionally hidden and inaccessible through a standard web browser. You can't just launch Chrome or Firefox to access the dark web, or the dark net as it's sometimes called. Users need to go through specific software such as the Tor, which stands for the onion router. Yes, I know this sounds like a funky name, but onion routing is how people navigate the dark web or communicate anonymously. Because of the anonymous nature of the dark web, again, it's a hotbed for stolen data. This screenshot illustrates how easy it is to actively search for leaked databases on the dark web. Despite the presence of actual criminal activity on the dark web, the process of stolen corporate data sets ending up for sale on the dark web, it's a long and complex process for the cyber criminal. For the cyber criminal, the bad actor goes well and above the technical know-how with access to closed networks and trusted individuals. What makes it easy for these cyber criminals is a leak of administrative credentials. Like we went back to on that second slide that we looked at, all of those different platforms that we log into using our email addresses and passwords. If those passwords are leaked, unfortunately, stealing data becomes very easy for the cyber criminal at the end of the day. A few years back, roughly 4 million records containing the personal details of Time Warner Cable customers were discovered stored on an Amazon web server without a password. So this information was being housed on the internet without a password, all due to an employee not putting this data behind the proper lock and key. And as a result, these customers' data, it was discovered by cyber criminals. They quickly stole the data from where it was housed and they posted it for sale on the dark web. And Time Warner Cable was then left to clean up this mess. And like we talked about on a few slides back, because they were regularly negligent with their data, they actually faced larger fines because of that. You know, something that you'll commonly hear on the dark web as well is nothing personal, it's just business. It's a quote attributed to Otto Berman, who is an accountant for organized crime. Yes, organized crime, they have their own accountants. Cyber criminals are motivated by various factors, but the predominant one simply is money. You know, cyber criminals do not care about the good that your business does, the impact of their actions it will have, or the fact that what they're doing is illegal and immoral at the end of the day. They have justified their actions and they just want to make as much money as possible from the event with as small of an investment as possible. One of the main reasons cyber criminals love to target businesses and small businesses, that is actually the lack of security. Many small businesses simply do not have the resources to maintain up to date on security protocols. While major breaches make headlines, you know, just below the surface, there's a constant and increasing level of cybercrime that is targeting smaller organizations. In the physical world, you know, large companies have the resources to use security guards, complex monitoring systems, and high-tech entry devices. Small businesses are targeted because they don't often have the measures, so thieves can evade that detection. The same is true in the virtual world as well. Unfortunately, for small businesses, the consequences of compromises can be severe because they are less able to cope with the cost and the damage that a data breach can occur. Despite the vast number of attack vectors a large corporation offers many cybercrimes, cybercriminals often lack the skills or even the patience to try to get through those large organizations' data. Small businesses are vulnerable, again, because they don't often have much of the budget for security measures, or they don't fully appreciate the scale of the risk that they face. Many small businesses often overlook the value of the information that they also store, believing it to be too little of interest to anybody at the end of the day. Now, something that's interesting, and I know we've talked a lot about personal data, we've talked a lot about business data, but today voter data is just as much of a target for malicious hacks and breaches as, let's say, credit card data. And it's equally susceptible to poorly secured digital infrastructure. A study by the Privacy Affairs investigated dark web voter data market to identify the U.S. states where the voters are most vulnerable and which voter databases fetch the highest price tag. The study also discusses how the democratic system can be compromised by these hacked and illegally obtained voter databases. The study found the following. Full and partial voter databases of the most U.S. states and millions of citizens' private information are being sold on the dark web. On the next screenshot, we'll definitely share some of these databases, but most databases are sold for around $10. The hacked databases include voter ID, full names, physical addresses, previous addresses, date of birth, gender, and citizen status. The hacked data even reveals if one has voted in a past election. Now, here's that list that goes over curated lists of voter registration data that's actively being sold on the dark web. The most worrying part of the problem is that the hacked voter data shows whether a particular voter has voted and in what election. The databases are used by campaign operatives to better target audiences, create maps of potential voters based off of their location, status, race, and even marital status. It's also possible to determine an individual's voting habit using these details. Due to them being illegally sold on the dark web, foreign state actors can potentially also use this leaked data to target propaganda and even disinformative campaigns. Again, just sharing bad information out in lines of the elections and or any sort of elections that we voted on in the past couple years. And as a fun fact, Florida citizens' data was some of the highest coveted on the dark web. Don't know why the state of Florida, but just thought it was an interesting little tidbit. Now moving into another screenshot here. This is also one of my favorites. You know, what we're looking at is a screenshot from a website called Alphabay. Alphabay was a popular website on the dark web. In fact, it was run similarly to a website like eBay, or potentially even the early days of Amazon. Authorities say this site trafficked, fake and stolen IDs, computer hacking tools, firearms, and other counterfeit goods. The site also facilitated such services as money laundering. I don't know if we have any Breaking Bad fans out here in the audience, but as a company, Alphabay went as far to hire scam watchers to monitor and put a stop to scams on their already illegal website. Alphabay went as far to employ a public relations manager responsible for outreach to all of its users and to help broaden the illicit trade community, or again, make sure that folks were constantly buying the information that they were selling. The site also employed moderators to resolve and dispute and refund payments when necessary. So again, really think about how these organizations are set up to run and how they truly operate like a business at the end of the day. Overall, Alphabay took 2 to 4% commission on all the deals made on their website, and that really added up. The cybercriminal that was behind this website has an assumed fortune of $23 million. So think about it. If we go back to what that credit card data was selling for, or what the corporate data sets were selling for, you're looking at figures that are typically $10 to $110. If a website like Alphabay is only taking 2 to 4% of a commission on that, and the folks behind these sites have a fortune of $23 million, I think that just puts into great perspective how often the information is bought on the dark web and really the demand for it that's there. And that's a concept that we're going to talk about a little bit later on within the presentation. Now, if we look at this particular screenshot, we're going to go back to the reputation and leaving reviews for websites like this on the dark web. Trust is a key factor for everyday internet users. These users rely on websites, internet infrastructure, hosts, organizations, and governments to maintain the security and privacy of their data. The assumption that these users trust the legitimacy of platforms, both technically and lawfully, is an integral part of our internet ecosystem. Cybercriminals who buy, sell, and trade illicit services or goods have similar assumptions with these marketplaces on the dark web that they interact with. But they play a riskier game because they are most likely breaking the law in the process. Cybercriminals seek dark web marketplaces that have a reputation for serving their needs in an operationally secure manner. So those reviews that we saw in that screenshot are key for cybercriminals. They really go off of reviews because overall, every transaction that happens on the dark web, it's done anonymously. So you don't know who you're talking to, who you're speaking with. So reputation becomes a vital measurement for both the marketplace that they frequent, as well as the actors that they engage with. Similar to the surface web, and the surface web is what we utilize for our everyday work functions. That's what we serve Facebook on. But again, similar to the surface web, consumer marketplaces Criminal marketplaces and forums employ reputation systems to help crowdsource and build trusted relationships and ratings, which can highlight the good faith actors and outcast the scammers or untrustworthy members that could be lurking in the dark web. Now, something else and another tactic that cyber criminals will often use is offering holiday discounts. And I think we have to go into this with the mindset that our organizations or our businesses that operate ethically are doing the same thing. And for cyber criminals, discounts are no longer just for the holiday season. Countless legitimate businesses are offering discounts or altering their services to turn a profit during the coronavirus pandemic. And these cyber criminal forums are no different. A hacking group named SS Hacker is offering a Facebook account hacking services with a 15% discount with the promotional code COVID-19. Another post offered customer service around the clock. On another website, a cyber criminal added, due to the current situation in the world, we provide a 20% discount on all of our services with the promotional code COVID-19 through the end of this year. Again, these tactics are being used by cyber criminals to attract new buyers because, of course, the more folks that are buying this information, the more money that's going to be in their pockets at the end of the day. Now, I think another tactic that we can talk about when it comes to cybercrime and how it's run like a business is classic supply and demand. And as we can see in this screenshot, this data set is so popular that it's sold out. You may also notice the use of the term fools. Fools is a general term that indicates a comprehensive package of information to create that full picture of the subject matter. It's a highly coveted underground criminal commodity, one could say. Fools often consist of a large precompiled list of stolen financial data, along with critical personally identifiable information, or PII, needed for an account verification and criminal manipulation. The PII often includes the full name of the business, billing address with zip code for US addresses, and phone numbers. Even more lucrative fool websites include personal PIN codes, the victim's potential mother maiden name for enhanced security. Think about all of the websites that ask a couple security codes. What are the most commonly asked questions? And mother maiden names are always on those lists. What's your dog's name? What was your high school mascot? And this information is often even posted on folks' Facebook pages or personal social media sites where cyber criminals are able to get their hands easily on that information. Sometimes fools will include the answers to security questions, again, for accessing banks, customer portals, or even mobile apps. Some fraudsters include people in their fools offering as family members rarely think to cancel their credit cards that are no longer in use. There are several dark web hidden services that fall under these fools lists that are being purchased on the dark web. One market known as Fools Buy is a logo designed with a price tag, and it looks just like Best Buy. And with this particular website, you would buy a driver's license database, including social security numbers stolen from businesses. And they're often stolen from loan companies, those companies that we are getting business funding through. Potentially you go out, you buy a new office location, and the loan company that you're utilizing, potentially they've gone through some sort of data breach or a security incident, and that information winds up in the hands of the cyber criminals. Now, as we mentioned earlier, data is money, and cyber fraudsters are readily targeting businesses to increase their earnings by stealing from banks, credit card, online merchants accounts and data that, can be sold on the dark web for a lot of money at the end of the day. In the simplest of terms, carding involves the illegal use of a credit card by an unauthorized person to purchase a product, and there's a couple of different paths a cyber criminal can take with this information that they've purchased or found in the underground. Some fraudsters might use account information such as a web login or that username and password to an account to get through to that information. Others take stolen credit card numbers from those dumps and those fools websites that we spoke about, and make purchases illegally digitally. And then they have the goods shipped to a drop address. Many of these purchases, especially if they are low dollar value, go completely unnoticed by the business, as a few people actually review their purchases on their credit card statements each month. Some more sophisticated cyber criminals will even take the data and create counterfeit credit cards for in-person use or directly at the merchant. Going back to that one screenshot that's selling the credit card data, that company will discreetly mail you that card so you can use it as a physical location. Often the fraudsters then purchase large quantities of high-end electronic goods or other expensive goods for resale or trade, again, back on the dark web. I have two more screenshots of the dark web, but to really kind of tie up this concept and how it's run like a business, this is a screenshot of a job posting. Again, those modern cyber attacks like phishing, they can be profitable for cyber criminals. The cost of launching a phishing attack is low, and again, a single successful phishing attack can yield thousands or even millions of dollars in revenue for a cyber criminal. Having this proven, predictable business model has enabled cyber criminals to scale, attract investors, or folks looking to make a lot of money. In a market where money can be made, you're going to find a pool of talented individuals. This is a job ad for a software designer on the dark web, and this position has a starting salary of just $765,000 for the year. And over the course of 2 years, this person is going to make well over $1 million. So again, the cyber criminals that are out there trying to get through to our data, they're highly talented individuals. I know I mentioned earlier, hearing about cyber attacks in the news, and if you keep up with things, I'm sure you've heard about Zoom bombings. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many companies to switch to remote working, Zoom and other video conferencing services, they've really enjoyed the surge in popularity. Unfortunately, Zoom users have become a target for cyber criminals. There are several Zoom accounts that are currently either for sale or being given away on hacker forums on the dark web. The credentials don't seem to be obtained from Zoom itself, but more so from, folks reusing passwords from other logins, other websites that they've logged into, they've been breached. And because users have reused that password on Zoom, the cyber criminals are now able to get into their Zoom accounts. And unfortunately, this is how those uninvited guests wind up within a meeting. I will also say, when it comes to sharing Zoom links, potentially think twice about posting it in a public forum. I know a few months ago, remotes or virtual happy hours were very popular. And I saw a lot of folks posting their Zoom links right on their social media pages. And potentially a cyber criminal, they're going through those social media pages, they say a Zoom link, and potentially they just hop in that meeting to see what kind of trouble they can cause at the end of the day. Now, this is where we're going to kind of switch things up and move a little bit away from the dark web and talk about other ways that data is becoming exposed. It's not just your information that is for sale on the dark web. You can also buy hacking tools as well. Ransomware is a form of malware where cyber criminals attack your systems with a malicious code. The intent is to lock you out of your data and encrypt your most important information. Ransomware as a service borrows the software as a service model, and this subscription model for these malicious users enables even the most novice of cyber criminals to launch ransomware attacks without much difficulty. Ransomware took off because it tends to be much more lucrative than databases. Undoubtedly, the advent of ransomware as a service has contributed greatly to the exponential growth of ransomware attacks. The biggest danger of ransomware as a service is it's made it possible for just about anybody to become a cyber criminal. This vicious model is enticing to cyber criminals because you'll even see advertisements on the dark web that say, hey, we're providing this software. It's lucrative for a lot of organizations, and the folks that are selling it in a franchise-like model. So of course, there's a lot of just money to be made within this community. And again, First and foremost, it enables ransomware authors, the folks that are writing this software, to earn quick money at the end of the day. As for the creator of the actual code, it decreases the need for them to write more malicious code, and they can simply just rent out the easy-to-use packages at a low price. And I think ransomware is that thing that we just hear more and more about in the news. You know, at the start of the summer, we had the ransomware attack that plagued the pipeline. And there's nothing worse than opening up your computer one day, realizing that you've been locked out of all of your sensitive data. And if you don't have the right process in place, you know, knowing what you need to do next, it can become truly a tumultuous process at the end of the day. Phishing attacks are another efficient way for cyber criminals to cause some serious damage. Phishing kits are now also available for purchase on the dark web that allows these novice cyber criminals to create fake landing pages for various websites that can be used in a phishing attack. It's also easy and even includes all of the necessary code. You know, most of these malicious ransomware styles attacks are delivered through phishing emails. Phishing attacks have also unfortunately again been made easy for cyber criminals to deploy. You can buy a full campaign, including the content to send out as your own phishing attack and the ransomware code that you can include as an attachment or as a link. Now, based off these last two screenshots, I obviously don't recommend that somebody uses this information to go out and become a cyber criminal. We just want to talk about different things that are contributing to the growth of cyber attacks and why we're hearing more and more about them in the local media and even the national news. Now, for the next couple screenshots, what we've done here is we have side-by-side comparisons of real Facebook pages or real pages that are out on the internet versus these fake phishing pages. So on this one, we can see the actual screenshot of Facebook and then a phishing site that a cyber criminal has created to look like Facebook. As you can see, everything is pretty spot on. And the biggest difference is really just going to be the URL itself. And you're busy in your everyday life, you know, a URL can be easily overlooked by an end user. Here's an example of eBay. You know, again, the screenshot on the left is the real eBay site, but then the screenshot on the right is the site that was created by a cyber criminal. And I think what is most interesting about these fake landing pages is the fact that all of the links work. So if you were to go to a fake site created by a cyber criminal, you would be able to log in with your Facebook page. You would be able to click on the Norton logo at the bottom of the screen, and it would likely redirect you to that page as well. But what you don't realize is when you start to click on the links here, those could potentially have ransomware behind it, where if you click, you know, it installs that malicious code on your computer, and the cyber criminal now has access to that data. Or if you do enter in your credentials, let's say that email address and password, you know, that cyber criminal now has that information and they can go and check, you know, again, hundreds of websites to see if you've reused those credentials anywhere else. Here's another example of a USAA landing page. And the one on the right is the landing page that was created by the cyber criminal versus the one on the left is the real page itself. And again, even with this page having a ton more links, these would all be working on the fake phishing web page as well. And I think we've talked enough about phishing, but I think because phishing is such a prevalent issue, it warrants having its own section in this presentation. You know, how many times have you received a suspicious email that you've won something? Maybe you received one pointing to a free Amazon gift card, or maybe you get an email from what looks like an executive at your organization asking you to maybe go out and buy gift cards. Also, here's another classic. How about an email from, let's say, a Nigerian prince who wants to reward you and share his vast fortune if you help him claim it? Now, if you've been using the internet for a while, you're probably no stranger to any of these phishing emails. Cyber threats are not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, they continue to evolve and become more and more sophisticated as time goes on. Hackers are constantly changing their tactics, techniques, and procedures. The pandemic has also created a breeding ground for cybercrime. As March 28th of last year, the number of cyber attacks related to the coronavirus grew from a few hundred a day to over 5,000 in one day alone. Cyber attacks continue to rise to a point as where on April 6th of 2020, the FBI released an official statement regarding the increase in phishing attacks. Overall, 71% of security professionals have reported an increase in security threats or attacks since the COVID-19 outbreak. Looking at this particular screenshot, these are real examples of phishing emails that have gone around. And this one looks like it's coming from the Human Resources Department. You can see the key indicators highlighting what would make this email fraudulent, but these are things that your employees should be out on the lookout for. With cyber attacks increasing exponentially each year, it's critical that companies ingrain a cyber-aware culture throughout their organization. People, not technology, are key to providing an adequate level of security. That is because hackers know that employees are the weakest link in information security and actively work to exploit them through phishing attacks and other means. As remote work becomes more of the normal, it has also resulted in a growing number of threats for many organizations. In fact, 95% of cybersecurity professionals say that they are facing additional challenges with increased attacks from the new work from home demands. The sudden shift in circumstances have impacted the way that employees access business applications, and it truly has increased the potential attack surface. As cybercriminals increase their efforts, awareness is the most powerful weapon against invading their threats and their techniques. Here's another email that appears to come from the World Health Organization. Phishing emails will often prey on the emotions of individuals. This will make them much more likely to click on the link and potentially enter in their credentials. Phishing emails over the past few months contain words like COVID, coronavirus, mass test, quarantine, and vaccine to play on people's concerns and socially engineer their reactions. Cybercriminals have even falsely alerted employees that somebody in their team has tested positive for the virus and that they need to read the instructions to keep them safe. What they do is then that they actually attach an attachment with a malicious code that people will click on. And then once folks click on that attachment, it contains the virus that affects that PC. But people are more likely to open that document because it contains information that is deeply rooted in reality, overriding their ability to assess the email and what it truly is at the end of the day. You know, this one contains a link itself from something from the CDC, something that many individuals would likely to click. Phishers emphasize on writing a phishing email that convinces the target to take action immediately. The messaging is such that the reader takes the action almost immediately regarding the email without giving a second thought. This is important because if the target takes their time or analyzes the email that they're going to take action with, they'll probably identify that it's a phishing email and no further action will be taken. Typically, phishing emails guide you towards an inevitable call to action. This may not necessarily be obvious. For an example, the phishing email will land in your inbox that contains information about a newly launched credit card, and it has the usual clickable links. The attacker also includes the unsubscribe link at the bottom of the email as a means to improve an email credibility. Here's the catch though. Clicking on the unsubscribe link will take you to the same place, that malicious website, or trigger the same action, potentially that ransomware, just by clicking on that link as well. And in this particular case, you were given kind of that illusion of choice, but in reality, you didn't have a choice at all because you were still taking action, and that's what the cyber criminal wanted at the end of the day. In this particular example, you know, this email contains links and many key indicators of a phishing email. After all the hard work that the cyber criminal goes through of crafting a phishing email, the email must be sent to the target. Attackers can create new email accounts on generic services like Gmail for this purpose. The purchase of unregistered names or domains similar to a reputable company is often done by cyber criminals as well. In the latter, spellings are tweaked, potentially in a slightly manner that are not obvious to the recipients. There's also the advanced phishing attacks where the attackers infiltrate the email accounts that belong to legitimate sources, again, to send that scam message. That goes back to how many folks are reusing similar passwords across multiple logins. And if you are reusing your Office 365 password in other locations, it's definitely something to consider to change that password to make sure that your email inbox stays more secure at the end of the day. In cybersecurity terms, this is also called business email compromise. And these cyber criminals, in essence, could be using your business email address that is compromised, which is used to then send phishing emails to your coworkers or your customers at the end of the day. Now, phishing attacks aren't just for our inboxes anymore. SMS phishing attacks are as far off as the misleading email addresses. And these are now text messages sent by cyber criminals to obtain our information. Their goal is to really trick us into believing that the message has arrived from a trusted person or organization. I actually got a phishing text message a few months back from an 800 number asking me for my Amazon password reset code that was just sent to my email for verification. This came through on a Saturday afternoon as I was busy running errands, and it took me a second. But it dawned on me that an organization like Amazon would never ask me for my password reset code as a form of verification. As a matter of fact, it was the cyber criminal trying to social engineer me into sharing my reset code so he could take over my Amazon account and gain access to the financial information that lived behind it. And I know we've kind of ran through phishing attacks, ransomware, how this information winds up on the dark web. So it was a little bit of doom and gloom. But it's all things that we want to be aware about, as the internet is a huge part of our business life. Our data is what helps our business stay operational at the end of the day. So we want to make sure that those things truly do stay secure. With phishing becoming so common, I wanted to share these tips. The CDC recommends that you take 20 seconds to wash your hands to avoid germs, and we recommend that you take 20 seconds to review any suspicious emails or texts that you receive. A couple things. Legitimate companies will always call you by name. Phishing emails typically use a generic salutation such as "Dear Valued Member" or "Dear Account Holder." You want to make sure that you do regularly train and test your employees on what to be aware of when it comes to phishing attacks, as these attacks become harder to spot to an untrained eye. Legitimate companies also do not request your sensitive information via email. Chances are, if you receive an unsolicited email from an institution that's asking you to open a link or to share sensitive information, it's a scam. Legit companies also have domains. They won't be using Gmail accounts. They won't be using Yahoo accounts. And legit companies also don't send unsolicited attachments. So if you do see, let's say, an attachment on an email, maybe you receive an invoice from a company you never receive an invoice from, it's likely that that is a hacker wanting you to click on that invoice to then, install some form of ransomware or some sort of virus on your PC to get through to all of your data. Major events like the coronavirus pandemic create new opportunities for cyber criminals to exploit, but smart defense doesn't let them. Here are some more helpful tips that we're going to run through that are going to help keep your systems and your data safer in uncertain times. Creating a culture of cybersecurity is really the best way that you can prepare your employees for any sort of incoming attacks. First and foremost, change your passwords regularly. And when it comes down to changing your passwords, if it's a website that houses sensitive data, the longer the password, the better. The more unique password, the better, because it's going to be harder for the cyber criminal to obtain those passwords. And if they do obtain those passwords and you're not using it across other websites, the less of a chance that they're able to back channel their way through multiple logins. Also, another step towards security is monitoring your company's domain for signs that your information is being sold on the dark web. The first step is knowing. If you don't know that this information is out there, how are you going to be able to, move forward? So it's good to know with continuous monitoring when that information does come about. If you are working from home, use a VPN connection while working, just because it's more secure at the end of the day. When it comes to opening those unknown emails, if it's somebody you don't receive an email from often, or there's just something about it that doesn't seem right, don't click on links. Double check with a trusted advisor to see if it is a true phishing email or if it's a real email that needs to take action on. But it's better to approach those with a more cautious mindset. Also, update that software regularly. I know we all get those pop-ups from Windows saying you need to restart your computer at a time of the day where it just does not seem right. But it's important to keep your software up to date because out-of-date software also creates a breeding ground for cybercriminal. Use multi-factor authentication when you can. Use work devices for work purposes. And if you are having folks work remote, create a work remote policy for your organization because, again, having the right steps and knowing what to do if a cyber attack were to happen, it's best to prep your employees that way. Now, with all of this fun stuff being said, I want to turn things back over to Sherry.
Katie, you did such a great job. Thank you so much for coming on and breaking down, or rather taking a deep dive into the dark web, including all the screenshots and everything. I know that we have been communicating about this webinar for the past couple of weeks now, and even going back through and really having your perspective on breaking everything down, it's still scary at the end of the day. So we want to actually end this webinar with a possibility actually for a free dark web scan analysis. If you have watched this either now or you're watching it later down the road, all you need to do is email myself, Sherry at teamcts.com, and we will be able to provide a free dark web analysis. What does this mean? Basically, we take the email that you supply to us, and we do a safe scan on your email and show you what is floating around in the dark web. But in the nutshell, we're trying to make sure that you can get ahead and stay ahead in regards to your IT. Katie, thank you again for reaching out, or rather coming together for this webinar. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If you guys have any other questions, feel free to email myself again, Sherry at teamcts.com, or leave a little question in the chat section. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and hopefully we'll hear from you guys soon. Bye.